So, welcome everyone to the very first edition of Diatribe with yours truly, Phoenix Normand. I used to be an executive assistant for about 27 years, assisting some pretty fantastic people, I like to think at least, and, really sort of built a career that I am pretty proud of after all of that time, that then sort of morphed into me being a CEO 3 times over and really trying to pay it forward, all of that information, all of those years, to my current tribe, as well as executive assistants throughout the world. So this particular series is something that I dreamt up, of course, over champagne, because that's how I come up with my best ideas. And it's one of those things that I wanted to sort of put out into the world. I tend to be one of those truth seekers and truth tellers. And I call it diatribe because I'm usually on one. But I also like, I like just telling it like it is, and putting, truth and honesty out into the world, and doing it in a way that makes people think more than anything. It's not to be, accusatory or point fingers or whatever, unless that's necessary. But I think, again, just having a forum where we can actually talk about real issues and talk about our beliefs around real issues, and just kind of take it with a grain of salt. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's fine as well. But at least the information's out there. So I'm super excited, first of all, because I've got my buddy as my first guest, Maria Alonso. She is someone that I met, oddly enough, at a conference many years ago. Exactly. And she impressed me from the second we started talking. I was just like, oh my God, I want to be her when I grow up. Like, literally. She easily is one of the, I can honestly say this, one of the top 3 executive assistants of all time, as far as I'm concerned, of people that I respect. The other 2 being Anne Hyatt and Andrea Besman. Anne Hyatt is Anne Hyatt. Everybody knows who she is, okay? Okay. And then Andrea Besman, I used to work with at Levi Strauss, who's now Mark Zuckerberg's executive assistant. And Maria easily slots right on in there. I mean, she's brilliant. She's fearless. She's comprehensively everything, educated, empowered. She's a researcher like me, a bit of a geek when it comes to trying to figure things out. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm being way too effusive. I know you're just like, shut up already. But I respect her tremendously. So Maria, let the kids know a little bit about you. And,
thank you, Phoenix. It is very difficult to live up to that intro. I've been an executive assistant for a little over 8 years now, mostly in the healthcare sphere, life sciences, that arena, some machine learning, artificial intelligence, that kind of thing. I started off actually in publishing because I was an English major, and I can't tell you how much that has paid off in my career. I absolutely use my English degree every single day, and it's the best investment I've ever made. But I sort of fell into being an EA. I hit sort of the top of where I could go as the development editor in life science. And so one of the VPs who transferred over to a different division of the company I was working for, their CEO needed an EA, and she liked working with me so much and thought I would be really good at it. So she brought me over. And that's sort of where the bug started. And it's, gone on ever since. And it's been really, really fun.
I love that. I love that story, just because I think we've all sort of, in a weird way, fallen into this role. I've not met many people that have, sought to be executive assistants or administrative assistants. Is typically where you start out. Mm-hmm. And it's funny how the ones that fell into it are the ones that are, oddly enough, the most successful at it. Mm-hmm. And I think that comes from the most successful ones specifically. It comes from being able to draw on different experience, different types of experience, different types of accountabilities, etc., and actually leverage all of that in the role as an EA. Mm-hmm. So, kind of jumping right into it. I mean, as most people know, I tend not to hold my tongue when it comes to executive assistants, just because I care about them so much and I care about the profession so much. But, I honestly believe that the COVID-19 corona apocalypse, whatever the hell you want to call it, has actually shown the biggest spotlight on this role. And in my opinion, has officially obsoleted the traditional executive assistant role. And the reason I believe that is because I think because of the lockdown, because of all of the remote work, and because, you know, companies are hemorrhaging money, they've had the time to really comb through every single role, every single accountability, responsibility, et cetera, really look at the balance sheet and kind of see what their expenditures are and start going through and just line iteming out, getting that red pen and going to town. And it's always been this way, it seems like, but executive assistants have always been the lowest hanging fruit, because people, unfortunately, we, after all these years as EAs and AAs, all the way back to freaking secretaries and Girls Friday and all this other crap, we've never been able to perfect our PR around this role. We've never been able to really explain, if you will, what we do and how important and vital actually we are to companies. So they've been able to sort of come up with a narrative of their own. And I'm sure you've dealt with this in many times throughout your career. I know I dealt with it many times throughout my career, that whole, you know, what do you actually do? BS and people just assuming that you just push in conference chairs and go get coffee and get the order wrong because you're stupid. You know what I mean? Shit like that. And so I'm, you know, all that said, you know, let me go ahead and get my questions ready, because I think you'll enjoy these, you know. As I said, I think the traditional role is dead, and I think there is a new executive assistant that's emerging, and that's really what I've been trying to sort of coach and teach and all of that for the last really 4 years that I've been out on the road. But here's a question for you. You know, what do you think are the chief deficiencies in today's executive assistants?
That's a really good question. I
Oh, there's so
think,
many more.
right. I think that it's a really flexible mindset is the most important thing that you have to have to
Right.
be an EA. And so often I've seen EAs pushing to train their executives the way they want. And I think that there is a certain amount that you can do that. You can train an exec, but at the end of the day, you're not going to fundamentally change the way they work. And so being able to adapt to how your exec thinks and moves and the way they process information, that's the number one most important key aspect to have. And I think that a lot of EAs are resistant to it because it essentially means more work for them.
Well put, well put. Because I'm kind of curious. I mean, people get really aggro about this whole, you know, I think they take the term parity to an extreme when it comes to that relationship. And it's like, calm down, first of all. It's not our job, nor have I ever seen it in any job description that I've had, for me to change my boss and the way that they work just to be able to work with me. That's never been the case. Like, let's be honest, there is a hierarchy. As much as people don't want to admit it, there's a hierarchy. And the expectation is, if you work for me or if you work for this company, you will morph your little situation into what works for me. And yes, there is some give and take. I totally believe that. But I think, you know, I think it's foolish to go into any sort of relationship, especially as an executive assistant to an executive, thinking that you're going to completely change the way that they work in order for you to work together. I think that's really an expectation that's either being taught by a bunch of other EA advocates or whatever out there, or whatever the case may be. But I just, that's one of the things that sort of really riles me up. And it's like, no, you're missing not only the point, but you're also missing the opportunity. And I feel like the opportunity is, you know, you want to figure out how people work. You want to figure out what made them successful, because inevitably that's kind of, in my opinion, the seat that I want at some point. You know what I mean? So why wouldn't you sort of just morph, obviously, you know, setting some boundaries, of course, with regard to treatment and all of that, but why wouldn't you sort of morph the way that you work so that you can take in that information and you know, maybe kind of speak the same way, you know, learn the lingo, speak it, you know, regurgitate it, to be honest with you. So anyway, I'm just kind of curious, what do you think about that?
Yeah. So when I start with a new exec, the first thing I do, and I tell them this, so I'm very upfront about it, is like, I want to watch how you do things. And I will ask probing questions because it's because I want to know how you think and how you respond to things so that I can then learn how to respond similarly so that we can have like less back and forth. So it's less cumbersome to you.
Right.
And I think that a lot of the trying to train executives is in the name of streamlining, streamlining how they work, making things easier for them. But really what I'm paying attention to is when they have a problem, where do they look first? Where do they go first?
Well put.
And if that's something like a Google Doc, if it's, in Box, if it's in, Quip, Notion, Slack, a number of things. I want to know where they're looking first, because to me that says that's where we're going to put things. Let's get them all into one place, because that does make sense. And, if that's your instinct, let's build on that. And let's build on why that is. Like, do you like the efficiency of the program? Like, do you just understand how it works and you don't have time to like learn a new tech? Like things like that. So that's really important to me. And I think that's where a lot of people aren't paying attention, because they're always on to like the next hot thing.
Right.
And if your exec doesn't use it, then it's not of use to you.
Yeah.
I've had execs be really big on Slack, be really big on Asana, be really big in Microsoft Office. And so you just have to learn how to adapt to what they use. And, it's about how you support them, how you make them better. So you have to pay attention to those little things.
Right. And I love that, because I remember sitting in on I don't think I was on a panel. I think I was watching a panel, and it was a big sort of to-do about, almost forcing the issue of putting executives onto unfamiliar either apps or, operating systems and all that other stuff. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, why are we even in here right now? This is crazy. I believe, again, it's one of those things where I love that phrase, listen to understand versus to respond. I think this is kind of one of those situations where it's like, if you can listen to really understand how they work, that's what you respond to, as opposed to, trying to show how smart you are, or how, app forward you are, how technologically savvy you are, just to impress someone that's like, look, dude, I'm just trying to do business right now. I'm not trying to learn a brand new friggin' app that I will never ever use. It's annoying. It's taking how many,
it's like they just have a finite amount of time to get prepped between meetings or between days. Yeah. So it has to be as easy, as accessible for them as possible. One click. If they don't know where it is, they ask me, I immediately know where it is, and it's done. So it's just easy peasy. I want them to feel like it is effortless. And most importantly, I want them to know that they can ask me and I'll take care of it.
Right. I love that. There's a quick question for you. It wasn't even on my list. Give me a percentage from 0 to 100. What percentage of this role, especially at the top, is optics versus what you know, who you know, all that?
I think it depends on the environment that you work in. So that's my first one. A lot of it, I've worked jobs where people know that in order to get to my exec, they go to me, and it's just because I make it easier, not because I'm stopping them from getting in there. It's just because I can't talk to them. They're obviously busy. Please help me with this problem or to get in. And they know that. But I've worked at companies where I worked there for 7 months and they didn't know who I supported or what I did. And I supported the CEO. And this is you need to understand that it's not a position that can't be shared with everyone. It's not a position where there's no visibility into the role. They have to know what I do and how I help you, and you have to support that. So it's not a matter of, so if they ask my exec a question, I'll say, I think it's this, and then they'll Slack me on the side and say, I gave this time away, and I was like, please don't do that. Because, and what I like to tell people, and so it doesn't sound like scolding, it is I'd rather take care of it than have to fix it.
Right. Oh, I love that.
I use that twice a day.
I'm here for it. Yeah, let's pour the champagne. We're done here. So thank you, Maria. No, I'm just kidding. No, I love that because, like, again, I think one of the biggest challenges I had as an EA until I got really savvy and really aggressive was, trying to walk that balance between. I don't like using the word gatekeeper. I think that's a silly term, but walking the balance between, me being able to sort of manage my brand as an executive assistant, as a, as Phoenix Normand, and then also get that point across as to exactly what it is that I do, the value that I actually create, and how going around me is a really, really bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
So, I literally, it felt like I spent probably the first third, possibly even the first half of my almost 30 years as an EA, perfecting that and getting that across to people. So I'm just kind of curious, again, off my list, this is fantastic. I love it. What sort of, I won't say tricks, but what sort of methods do you use in order for people to know who you are, to know, not necessarily know the power that you hold? I mean, let's be honest, we do. But to really understand, hey, there is a pecking order and there is a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. I can be your best friend or I can be your mortal enemy. Try me. You know what I mean? Or just follow the script. I'm curious, how do you go, from a personal brand perspective, if you will, how do you approach people, especially the ones that run errant many, many times? And I already know you and I know your history, so I know this has happened many times. That's why I really wanted to get your take on it, because I think a lot of at this level struggle with that.
So there are two different parts. There are the people who go around you just because they've worked with that exec for longer, or they have a closer relationship, so they think that's easier. And, I talk to that person directly, and it's like, hey, I saw that you put something on so-and-so's calendar, please keep me informed, because I had offered that space to somebody else, and now I have to tell them that now I have to take it away. So, it's like, to help them understand, I'm juggling so many meetings, so many priorities that are in the air, that the calendar changes hourly. So it's easier for me to know what's coming down, so that I don't have to move you, I don't have to cancel you. So, I'm trying to be respectful of everyone's time.
Right.
And then the other end of it is, when I start and I want to build relationships, what I start doing is talking to the people that the exec works most frequently with, any of their direct reports, and I ask them, what works really well for you? And so, what are your pain points? How can I help? Is it that you've sent them a document to review and approve and that you haven't heard anything, it just goes off into the ether? I'm like, please copy me on that. And I'm happy to follow up to make sure that gets done, because I want to make everyone's life easier. And, email or Slack or whatever communication is so often overlooked during the day when there are just a million things going on. And, but the only one tracking it is me. So I'm the one who's going to make sure it gets done for you.
Right.
And if there's anything that, that they know that are coming up, let me know so I can prepare. So for instance, if you're going to have a lot of meetings coming up in 2 weeks, let me know. I won't book that week yet. Like, I'll keep that clean for you so I know what's coming through. So the earlier I get into the know and the closer that we work together, the better it's going to work out for them, and ultimately make my life easier too.
Right.
So I think having people who don't, there are two levels. There are having people that don't have support like that. It's really new to them. And it's so great. They're like, oh my God, someone's going to help me get things done with this person.
Right.
And that's a really good relationship to have. And they'll work with you a lot more,
Right.
but you have to deliver.
Right.
So that's the thing, is
well
that
put.
there have to be results. Cause I'm very results driven. So, and I tell my boss, I don't like to have things on my to-do list. I write so many, I don't like to have them. I'm going to get it done. It's going to get off.
Right. Right.
So
I love that.
they know that it's going to be done, because I don't like to have things to do.
Right. Right.
So it
I
works
love
out
that.
really well.
I love that. I love that. And, well put with regard to, kind of working with people. What you said resonated, excuse me, with regard to people that aren't used to having, either having any support or especially I've noticed having like top quality support.
Mhm.
For instance, I'm sure you know you've dealt with this. I've dealt with this a lot as well. Executives that have an EA for the first time.
Mhm.
And then they, of course, as sausage factory owners do, typically want to hire, the dopest EA they can find,
Mhm.
even though they've never had an executive assistant before. So they
Mhm.
throw all the cash, they give all the promises and everything else. And then when you actually walk in the door and you're on campus and you're sitting in your seat, they have no idea how to utilize you. Um,
Mhm.
and it's weird because I found, and this is something I just want to get your opinion on, I found that sometimes executives, they have, I think, the best of intentions, but they haven't worked out for themselves, their own sort of flow,
Mhm.
their own, power or empowerment or voice, really.
Mhm.
And I found that more often than not, the executive assistant is the one who, ends up having to leave the company just because, they're under challenged, sometimes mistreated because the exec has no clue what they're doing, and it shows. And then they take it out on the EA. The EA is trying, flipping a million plates in the air, trying to get, really just trying to manage the brand for the executive, but the executive doesn't appreciate it because they look at it as a threat to an extent. It's
Mhm.
just so many weird scenarios that I've seen over and over, including the ones that I've been in. I'm just curious, like how. Actually, I did have a question around that, and maybe I'll phrase it this way. How many times have you stayed too long, and what were the lessons you learned?
Um, Very interesting. I haven't stayed too long in a situation like that. Mostly because I'm somebody who really likes to be challenged. And if I don't feel challenged in my position, I'm vocal about that and not afraid to find someone who will value me.
Right.
I think that people stay too long out of guilt or a misplaced sense of loyalty.
Mhm.
And
Here's a question
you
for
know,
you. Do you believe that there's loyalty in business?
I do to a certain degree.
Hmm.
Um, it depends on the person
Hmm.
that you're being loyal to.
Okay.
At the end of the day, business is business, and I understand that, and it's nothing personal.
Hmm.
But you can still be treated loyally,
Right.
even if you're going to say like be let go or something. You can still be treated right in that regard because sometimes it's just out of their control.
Right. Well put.
Um, because I've worked for CEOs that have had groups of people follow them for 20 years. That's loyalty. Like follow them through different companies and different opportunities because they love working with that person so much. Like that's loyalty.
Yeah.
So some businesses didn't work out, but when you find someone, you find a leader like that, you hang
Mhm.
on to them.
Right. Right.
Um, and the part where you know you have to feel challenged in a job or so you don't stay somewhere too long,
Hmm.
you can't give up immediately. There you have to make sure that you're advocating for yourself.
Right.
You have to just be really clear in your communication and expectations, especially when interviewing. Like, this is the kind of thing that I'm looking for.
Right.
And sometimes people are so desperate to get someone in, they want someone good, they will say, yes, 100%,
Anything.
that's what we're going to do.
Hmm.
And that might not be the case. And so then it's months of, well, we're just getting ramped up and, we want to get you settled before we start getting you into more like meaty projects
Hmm.
or anything like that. And then, you're still pushing, 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 but
Hmm.
nothing's coming. And you say, okay, this isn't working. Let's talk about why.
Right.
This is what I think that you really need. And sometimes what people need is just a coordinator.
Right.
They need someone to sit there and schedule and be reactive, not proactive.
Hmm.
Sometimes that's what they want. And there's nothing wrong with that. People
Right.
can want what they want. But at the end of the day, for me personally, that's not me. So I'll move on.
Right. That's perfect. And I'm exactly the same way. You know me, I I have the patience of a gnat, and my last two jobs, last one, two, yeah, I think it was two. My last two jobs lasted 7 months each because I was just like, I in my head, I was just like, okay, first of all, I am so sick of answering to anybody. So we already have that issue. And then again, working with executives that didn't have like my quality of EA
Mm-hmm.
before,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and had been burned numerous times before. So there's another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like for executive assistants that move into, actually, I don't know if I want to make a question of this because it's kind of moot, but, you know, I'm always curious about executive assistants that go into jobs or, you know, support CEOs or any executive who has had multiple executive assistants before that
Mm-hmm.
didn't end well.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't see the ROI of that at all, really working out. I mean, I tended to support the screamers. That was kind of the joke at all of the recruitment agencies that I worked for. Oh, Phoenix is here. Give him the Aries, you know, Ari from like Entourage, the show. And I deal really well with screamers because I don't take that shit from anybody. You ain't gonna scream at me, you know, big black man, big black gay man sitting at your desk who will have no issue walking up and getting 2 inches from your face to tell you exactly what I think. Luckily, I've only had to do that once, but you know, I think again, this actually goes to another question. You know, what situations should you really avoid? You know, as you're sort of working through you know, the research that you're doing, for instance, of someone that you want to work with, if you've seen that they've had, you know, numerous assistants within like a 2-year time frame, what are those red flags that you look for instance, like, you know, when you go through your recruiting cycles, when you do your research about an executive, that sort of give you the, you know, either side eye or you're just like, nope, you know, non-negotiables. I'm just kind of curious because I think that'll be helpful for people.
So I think when execs specifically, when you're interviewing, they are late, number one. And it's so funny because I know execs are always late, but for an interview, I never have my execs late because that just doesn't happen.
Right.
And they talk a lot first for a very long time. It's a little egocentric, which is fine on its own. It's fine on its own. It's very hard to be a CEO without an ego.
True. That's a
certain level. It's and I want to hear how they talk about the company. I want to hear how they talk about their employees, and I want to hear about the things that they do for their employees. But really, the thing that I pay most attention to is how other people that I interview with talk about them. Because it's everything they say or don't say. And, you know, I ask why they joined the company, why they like working there. You know, if there were things that they could change, what would it be?
That's a good one.
You know, and it's, if any of it is systematic or people oriented, that's not a good culture that you're gonna find yourself in.
Right.
So you have to be really careful. And, you know, I've been wrong before. And each job is just a learning opportunity to be like, okay, this is what I know I would do differently next time.
Right.
So, you know, you can just be wrong, but just learn from it.
Right. And I'm sure, you know, over time you've developed quite the good BS detector, especially during your interview cycles. Yeah. One of my favorite things to do, and it's in my book, is show up about 15 minutes early and just sit in, you know, sit and chill. Because I love those conversations, and they always happen in front of the elevator bank. Like, it is uncanny. You know, people show their true colors right before they get on an elevator or right as they get off of an elevator. You know, before they get on, if it's just like, F this place, man. Oh, I'm so angry. Oh my God, she's such a pain in the, you know what I mean? I'm just like, hold on now, let me get some popcorn ready. And, you know, and then when people come off, if they don't have like excitement on their face, or if they do the big fat sigh and then like their shoulders slump and then they start walking, I'm like, oh, this is so delicious. Because I'm just like, now let's see what you got to say. You know what I mean? So I'm sitting there like,
It's a lot of body language.
Yeah,
I watch a
exactly.
lot of people talking to the ones who sit at the front desk too.
Love it. I love that. And that's another thing too. That's really important, because if employees are talking crazy to the receptionist, you know you have a culture problem
Mm-hmm.
instantaneously. There's probably hierarchy. There's probably some sort of cultural issue. If it's a dude talking crazy to a woman, there's probably, it's rife with misogyny that's been normalized. You know what I mean? So it all goes down in reception. I'm just trying to let you know that, people. It goes down in reception. You can get so much juicy context from that. Anyway, let's move on. That's crazy balls. Let's see. Some good questions here. I'm gonna let's see if I can throw a good one at you. Oh, do you want to go in?
Oh, I'm nervous.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, here's a question, and this is something I've been asked a lot lately, but I just want to get your take on it. Is equality, gender, racial, and sexual orientation, is equality possible, or are we deluding ourselves? Ding.
Oh, okay. You should have had champagne for this.
I know, right?
I think it is possible. I think that it depends on. It's tough. There are a lot of factors.
Yeah, there are.
There are a lot. For just the reasons, like, I will never join a company that has an all-male exec team and all-male board. I won't do it, especially the majority, like, white men. I won't do it.
Right.
The reason that non-diversity has prospered so much is because white men hold all the money, and they're held to different standards, lower standards. Whereas anyone of diversity is held to higher standards and set up to fail. So I think that there needs to be a lot more support there. And the hard thing about business is that it is so much people that you know, which is why it becomes a frat. Because your buddies are the ones that you want to invest in your company. You want on their board. And then it just becomes, oh, I know this guy, he's really great.
Right.
And then it becomes, oh, we need a woman, let's make her the head of HR. And those are the only ever women. Oh, we need a person of color, let's make them the head of diversity and inclusion.
Right.
Like, those are the only times that, any diversity is ever added. And it's like, oh, we're going to get in a lot of trouble if we don't put a woman on our board. It shouldn't be about getting in trouble.
Right.
You have to think of who is the smartest person here. What value could they add to the knowledge that we have? What, point of view aren't we seeing? What point of view don't we have? If you're sitting in a room of all white men, literally anyone, take a pick.
Exactly.
Anyone. But it's, oh, I want to do my buddy a favor, let's get him on this board. Or, it's too much founded on who you know and not about your credentials.
Right.
And we know people of color aren't given the same opportunities. So they hold them to this they hold them to a different standard and are always found wanting because they don't have the same opportunities. So it's really hard to get them to that same level. Right. Do I think it's achievable? Yes. Will it be achievable in 10 years? It would have to be a huge shift.
Yeah. And, I'm glad you brought that up. You said something kind of important, and it also spurred a thought of mine. Like, one of the biggest issues that I have, and it feels like a safe space that a lot of, white male board members run to, is the idea of meritocracy. Meaning, the best person for the job is the one who should get the job, as opposed to the best Black person, the best woman, the best, disabled person, the best LGBT person, etc. And it's weird. I kind of have a dual answer to that. Yes, I do believe that always the person who can do the job best should get the job. However, the problem with meritocracy, in my opinion, right now, is the fact that the opportunity does not exist for everyone. It's easy to say, oh, the best person should get the job, but if you don't have a diverse enough pool from which to pull, then you're not really changing anything. You're basically, like you said, via, your buddies or someone that looks like you, kind of travels in your same pack, that sort of thing, that's probably the person you're going to gravitate toward, because you're not including, all of these other highly competent and highly capable people in the pool from which to pull. So in my opinion, the whole meritocracy debate falls flat on its face, just because, again, you're only pulling from a very specific select group of people. That's not real ocracy. You know what I mean, if you will. It's kind of silly to me. So that's one of the arguments. Anytime I hear someone, when I do my research, especially when I was in MBA and I was looking to work with someone, anytime someone was really pushing that whole meritocracy concept, that was one of the very first questions that I would ask them in the interview. It's like, okay, well, I'm curious, I've researched, they hate when I come in because I hit them with the pow pow, wow, I don't think I've ever been asked that before. I'm like, oh honey, that's only question one. But that's one of the things I'll hit them with. It's like, okay, well, I understand that you're big on meritocracy, but I'm curious, how is the pool from which you are pulling? Is your employee base, is the people that you hire, even your recruiters, are they diverse? Like, that's kind of important right now. I don't very often see diverse recruiting. Don't, all the recruiters look like, 20 something, girls straight out of a really good college with really cute hair, that just kind of, I feel like they're just kind of promoting their friends, or they're only kind of, promoting those resumes that again, fit a stereotype that unfortunately is coming from the C-suite. It's coming from the sort of white male C-suite of what it is that we're looking for, or at least they're kind of rationalizing, oh, they probably want someone similar to the other 6 people that I put in positions here, who all have blah, 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 blah. So, that's not to excoriate all HR people or all recruiters. I tend to do that anyway in my books. So I'm sure I'm not their biggest fan right now, but
I've seen a lot in hiring where, especially in like life sciences and engineering, when they say, we want people out of these top schools, like these programs are really great. Only put someone's resume in front of me out of these top schools.
Right.
That's where the problem starts.
Exactly.
So the issue is that not everybody has the opportunity to get into or go to those schools because of, financial reasons. It could be anything. And, so they're not going for the best of the best because they don't know until you interview who is the best of the best. They're going with a institution that they either went to themselves or know. And so, I think that's where it really starts.
Right. I agree. And I think a lot of, I went back and I did an audit of pretty much every company that I've worked for, and not a single one had any sort of outreach program or anything related to reaching out to HSBUs. Not a single one. And I'm just like, wow, you guys are really, really missing out on some great talent, because, you have to remember, a lot of these colleges were created so that, minorities could feel surrounded by other minorities because of, being kind of thrown into like a Columbia or Wharton or Harvard or whatever else. It's isolating because you're the token. Like, let's be honest, I'm just going to say it. So, those HSBUs they really have become a bit of a factory for brilliance, because, if you can at least remove that whole sort of societal pressure, to conform to a system that you don't really belong to, so to speak, then you can really focus on the mind and the mind share and the info share, and really sort of bossing one another up and getting, almost kind of competing with each other, but not against each other, if you will. You know what I mean? It's in a way that allows, these amazing, brilliant people to rise in the ranks and really be amazing hires if given the opportunity. Therein lies the issue. I mean, we bossed them up for you, but you're not even coming to see them. You know what I mean? So that's the reason why I asked the question, because I think, like you said, I mean, will it happen in a decade? Not without a whole lot of change, a whole lot of change. And I personally, maybe I'm just a pessimist. I don't see that happening. I don't. And it goes back to something. I love the book by Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility: Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. She says, to paraphrase, if it's not a problem for me, then I'm not really going to feel that compelled to sort of fix it. In other words, if it doesn't benefit me in my pocketbook, in my societal standing, or, kudos or brownie points or whatever else, then probably gonna back burner that, you
Yeah.
know?
It takes
Um,
a lot of action from the people who are creating the problem, instead of, you know, more headbutting for the people who are suffering.
mhm,
And it takes people like the founder of Reddit stepping down from the board so they
right,
put a Black member on the board. And like that is the kind of, that is the kind of leadership that will
right,
change companies.
right. Do you think that's going to be, here's a thought, actually. Here's a question for you, because
Mhm.
I really like your take, because I know you've worked for a lot of young leaders. Do you think the youngins are getting it? Do you think the young CEOs are getting it, or are they really just a carbon copy of the people before them?
Um, that's a tough take. Um, I think it's harder for the younger leaders because they haven't professionally worked with more people. So what they're doing is, you know, relying on people's history. So they're going to see more men who have done really great in companies, and they're going to hire more men, as opposed to they've worked with really great women in high level leadership positions. So they know already like everything that they can accomplish,
Mhm.
and so that's, I think, more limiting. Um, I don't want to say it's intentional, um, but you know, I think it goes back to, they rely on the people they knew in college,
Mhm.
especially for the younger ones.
Yeah.
They rely on people they knew in college, the relationships they made there, and more often than not, that is a very broy situation, and
Yeah.
that just, I think, organically happens.
Yeah. And it makes sense. And I also think, to add to that, a lot of their mentors are the people in the board, in
Mhm,
these very white male run boards.
mhm,
And I think the advice that they're getting, behind closed doors, and I've actually heard it, is exactly what they try,
mhm,
when they do, either happen upon their own business, or, they become the leaders of companies. But I'm heartened in that they'll try it, realize it sucks, and that it's old, it's very OG and old timey, and then they then sort of seek out, a different way of doing things, and start looking to people like Alexis Ohanian, like he did, stepping down from the board so that he can clear a space for someone of color.
mhm,
And really, I'm more than anything, I'm hoping that they get to a point where they can kind of usurp the information that they need from their mentors and then cut them loose.
mhm,
Because I think, mentors are, especially in business and especially right now, really only serve a purpose, and that purpose is network. As far as I'm concerned,
mhm.
advice, if keep it business, yeah, but as far as like any sort of socio-political or economic or whatever else, cut. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
when you put your earphones in and you're like, okay, well, thanks. Let's meet
Mhm.
next Wednesday and talk about scaling this company, as opposed to who you view as like the good workers, quote unquote, or whatever. Sorry, that was a digression. Let's go back. Um,
Good one though.
thank you for being such a good sport. So just in case you guys want to know this, I'm big on, I don't give people questions ahead of time. I don't like that, because I like real reactions to things. I do the same thing anytime I sit on a panel, anytime I do interviews, or now Zoom. Like my life depends on it. I don't like people giving me questions ahead of time, because I know that I come from a place of truth. So I appreciate you, Maria, being game to this. I'm
Oh,
sure
I'm
some
down.
people. um, Here's a question for you. I know you're going to be like, "What are you talking about?" Why is there such a quote unquote mental health crisis in this role as an executive assistant? And yes, I look at it as a mental health crisis, because yeah.
Um, I think because the role is so supportive of another person that very often people can forget to take care of themselves. So you will run yourself down, and um, you can't feed other people if you're not fed. Like if you don't have that energy, you can't. So you have to take care of yourself first. It's the same thing. I think that, you know, parents take, I think parents should take for their kids. Like, you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of children.
Mm-hmm.
I always call my execs my children.
They are.
My children. You know, and I think people are really, because the role is so predominantly female,
Mm-hmm.
women have trouble, I think, pushing back, because it's so looked down on, or even not even pushing back, or just like speaking for themselves. You know, like I'm always very vocal about this, and like, hey, I'm fried, you know, I need a day off.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I've had execs who have been like, that's great, absolutely, you know, I'll take care of myself. And I was like, I'm going to set you up, don't worry.
Right, right.
And I will, you can call me if there's an emergency, but
Mm-hmm.
no, I'll be offline.
Right.
And I've had execs who, after I get back from an offline vacation in which I had backup support,
Mm-hmm.
say that, oh, when you said you were going to be offline, I didn't think you wouldn't be checking your email. And I was like, okay, we obviously have very different definitions of what offline means.
Right. Right.
And I've had execs tell me, it's like, the only time I expect you to not answer your phone is when you're in the shower. So, you know, and that's, oh yeah, that happened to me. You know, and some people will say that, and be like, oh my God, I have to make sure that my phone is with me all the time, that I'm responsive. Like, they internalize that.
Right.
It's like, okay, but listen, I'm available for you, but your expectations have to be realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, you know, I over communicate, and it's like, if I know there's going to be a busy weekend for my exec and I'm probably going to be on call, but I'm doing something, I'll be like, hey, I'm popping into a movie for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I won't be reachable,
Right.
but when I get out, I'll take care of anything right away.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, so I think it's setting boundaries and expectations. I personally prefer roles that are 24/7 because I like that chaos, and I like solving problems.
Right.
So I don't mind it so much, but when I need to be off, I need to be off, and I make that very known.
Right. Right. And you and I are cut from similar cloth. I'm the same way. I'm like, give me all the crazy. Like, I love it. I love it. But at the same time, exactly that. Like, you know, if I'm exhausted and I've hit like that wall, I think executives, for me, I've been kind of lucky, because anytime I've really hit the wall and they actually usually tell me, they're like, dude, you look a mess. Do you need some time away? And I'm like, no, just leave me alone. You know what I mean? But, you know, I've been lucky in that I can usually say, hey, I definitely need a day, possibly 2 off. Is that okay? I mean, I'll keep an eye on email, make sure that you're covered and everything like that. But like, I just need some downtime. And they're just like, please go, because I can't lose you. And I need you at your very best, you know, so.
Exactly. They understand that. And it's like, if you want me to last long term, then you need to know that, like, I'll need short-term breaks, because I'm not a robot. Like, I need to recharge as well, because I make sure they're recharged
all the time.
And I appreciate the opportunity to do that as well.
Exactly. You know, so I know this is going to land on some people like, oh my God, like, I would never put myself through anything like that. And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, I'll save it.
There are different EAs. Yeah. Like, I grew up in Boston. I moved to the Bay Area because it's a different level of like support out here. And I wanted that. But it's not for everyone. So
true. Very true. And I think, right. And well put, because I think a lot of people, you know, paint in very broad strokes, you know, and I find myself guilty of that at times too, because I just expect everyone, having grown up, you know, really kind of cutting my teeth in Silicon Valley, you know, I sort of expect everyone to be at that level. And I'm always yanking and trying to pull everyone up to that level. And the hardest lesson that I've had to learn is not everyone is at that level. Not everyone even wants to be at that level. And that's a hard one for me to swallow, just because I want everyone to have just a good, real sense of success. So when they look back, when they retire from being an executive assistant, they can say, I pushed myself to the very maximum. And then I maybe backed off the gas for like the last couple of jobs in my career. And then I can just go out, you know, proudly write my book. You know what I mean? You know, take the idea that spawned from all those years sitting behind, a desk and to the right of someone, and, created a business of my own that is actually at the speed that I wanted. So, I think I get where you're coming from with regard to, people kind of working at, at their own pace, or in, to a level that they want. But the one thing that will still always drive me crazy is people almost kind of hiding behind the whole narrative of, not being able to sort of stand up for themselves, not being able to sort of, say no, I'm sorry, no, I'm not going to sit there and answer a bunch of emails when I'm having dinner with my family. Like, no, I'm not, so I always get that. It's like, well, there's a pressure. I mean, if they email me, I don't want to not seem unresponsive and all this other stuff. I'm like, that's a choice, boo. That is a choice. If you make that choice, then live with the consequences.
Yeah, I think it depends so much on the role, on where you are in life, on what you're looking for. Some people want that like 6-figure plus job, but they want to go home every day at 4, and be off. And it's like, well, if you find that unicorn, let me know.
Call me.
But and I've worked with really close exec teams who treat me like an equal. So if they're answering business, if they're working on business plans or goals or, OKRs at 8 p.m. at night, so am I, because I'm part of that team.
Right.
And, and then I've had jobs where the exec team didn't treat me as an equal. Right. And so it's like, all right, well, I'm gone at 6. So
right. Let me show you how unequal I am. Okay. Check my tag. Is it hanging out? Because that's the only side of me you're going to see right now. Yeah, so, exactly.
It's so hard to say that about every role.
Yeah.
It's so unique and personal, and you have to know what you want and what you're willing to do to get it. And, a lot of people aren't ready to have those really harsh conversations with themselves.
Right. That's very true. And since we're on the whole 6-figure diet, I like to call it, here's a question. Do you think we actually deserve 6-figure salaries? Sort of a side question. Do you think EAs understand that expectations rise with salaries?
I think there are a couple of factors here. One is obviously location. So, you're in New York, you're in the Bay. Yeah. 6 figures for a high level EA position, minimum.
Right.
You're at a really big company, maybe not C-level support. You have very defined hours. It depends on your list of responsibilities, right. And when whether or not that 6-figure salary makes sense. I think that people still have two mentalities. One, I've been in a company for a really long time. I deserve more money for doing the same job. That's not going to work. It's not the 50s anymore. You don't get promoted and more money for doing nothing.
Doing nothing else new. Right.
And staying at one company forever. That's not realistic.
Right.
But at the same time, you really have to grind for it. It's hard in this job because you're never going to you don't really get promotions.
Right.
Unless you start as an administrative assistant and go to an EA, a senior EA, that kind of thing. You don't really get promotions. So you get responsibility changes.
Right.
And so, you have to show that you're able to do all of those things before you can get the money for it.
Right.
And you have to consistently do it.
Right.
And so my job title hasn't changed in 8 years.
Right.
It hasn't, but my responsibilities have. Right. And I'll choose the job for the responsibilities over the title any day.
Oh, any day.
So, so I want to get paid for the job that I'm doing.
Right. And I guess that therein lies a little bit of an issue, because often, the way that, companies sort of draft their org charts, et cetera, and how they compensate based on those org charts, sometimes we get limited because of the title. The title, lands somewhere as contributor or something like that, as opposed to manager or senior or executive or whatever. So I think therein lies a lot of issues that people are running into, who want to make six-figure salaries, who actually deserve to make six-figure salaries, but the company has, designed it in such a way where they can't, simply because of the band within which they fall.
Mhm.
And I just think that's incredibly unfair. And that's another thing that I teach, obviously, executive assistants when I teach my TriView things is like, yeah, you need to go off script with regard to all that. Meaning, yeah, okay, I see your band. Yeah, I see your job description. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. But, this is what I'm actually doing compared to what I was hired to do. This is the value I've created, when I do the resume clinics and all that, these are my wins. This is how much money I made at the company, what efficiencies I created, or both, et cetera, et cetera. So the raise that I'm asking you for, which isn't in that sort of bell curve that everybody else gets graded on, so to speak, or has to fall within, I'm asking you for something that's probably 3x what, Sally Mae next to me is going to get. But I deserve it. And, that's really kind of my whole shtick around sort of helping people or empowering them with information of how to get those raises that are outside the norm. But, the reason I asked the question is I always get a lot of pushback, or I was just sort of randomly, like it's always on airplanes, by the way, because people always ask me what you do. And I give them my little elevator pitch about, kind of teaching, coaching, and mentoring executive assistants to multimillionaire and billionaire CEOs. That's always like a good attention grabber. And they're just like, how much do EAs really make? And I'm like, oh, my people minimum, like they're in that like 110, 120 range, all the way up to 200, 225. I just placed an EA that was, a $225,000 EA. And they're just like, what? Like full, freak face. And I'm just like, well, let me tell you exactly why. So it's funny how, there's still this sort of lingering, almost disbelief that executive assistants deserve six figures. And I believe, unfortunately, we're contributing to that narrative a little bit in the negative, just because of some of the behaviors that I'm seeing. Like you said, executive assistants who think they can walk away with the big fat 150 and go home at 4 o'clock. That's not how it works, boo. It hasn't in the 27 years that I was an executive assistant. With what is it? More money, more problems. Biggie said that. It's kind of the same thing with executive assistants. You have to understand when you're commanding those kinds of, that kind of compensation, there is sort of an unwritten expectation around that. Meaning, okay, if I'm paying you as much as I'm paying one of my senior managers, you better produce like a senior manager. And I think a lot of executive assistants are missing that. They're missing that in the translation somehow. They feel like, oh, just because I work on Sand Hill, I automatically get this and I deserve it. No, you don't. You don't. You need to show that you deserve it. And, again, I think that's one of the things that people kind of miss. I could talk to you. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, no, go
you
ahead.
never want someone to think that they can get someone as good as you or better for cheaper.
Right.
You want them to think, oh, this person's amazing. I underpay them.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like, well, yes, you do. Let's talk about that.
Exactly.
And that's how you get more money. And so, you want to be indispensable.
Yeah, it's so funny. I literally had one of my one of my CEOs said that. He's like, man, I got you for cheap. And I did and then I hit him with a $45,000 raise ask at my annual review. He couldn't give me the 45 because the board was just like, who is this? They knew who I was, but I got 35. I didn't get 45, but I got 35. So I was like, thank you, and that only got me to where I needed to be anyway. So it's kind of funny. I don't want to talk your ear off. I could talk to you all damn day. So let me ask you one more question. Let's see if I can give you a zinger. A zinger to go.
Dance my way out.
Actually, this is a good one. It's a good ending question. If you could give one piece of advice to an EA today that would completely change their perspective on the role, what would it be?
That's a really good one.
That's what I do.
To a fellow EA that would completely change the perspective of the role.
Completely change their perspective. Take your time.
I would say run an experiment. And for a month, read everything Your exec read everything, like research everything you hear the team talk about, um, and then have a conversation with them, an informed conversation with them, so that you know the topics, you know the context, and watch how everyone will look at you in surprise, and you can see just how little people might think of you. And so when you put in that extra effort and you show that you do know what you're doing, you will be treated better.
And there you go. I couldn't say I literally couldn't have thought of another better thing. I would have been like, show up one day with a torch. I don't know. I mean, that's just to sort of be like, give them a little heads up that you might be a little bit crazy. That's usually my advice.
Let's keep
But
them on
no,
their toes.
exactly. So I can't thank you enough, Maria. This
Thank you.
has been hopefully enlightening for people that are watching. It's like I said, I love this role. It's been my life literally
Mhm.
for a majority of my life, and it's one that I know you take seriously, that you continue to rock out on. On a daily basis, and continue to inspire me to want to help other executive assistants rock it out as hard as you do.
Thank
Thank
you.
you also for being a member of my tribe. I appreciate
Of
that
course.
because you kind of keep me on my toes. And um, again, I can't thank you enough. I think this is the beginning of a shift in this
Mhm.
role, and how it's respected, how it's empowered, the breadth of responsibility that it
Mhm.
will actually start to kind of come our way, and then also what the new version of this role will be and what it will morph into. And I think we will have a very definitive idea of what that is this year. I know that sounds crazy, but I completely believe it. So
Mhm.
thank you again. And
Thank you.
I will, of course, talk to you soon. Thank you, everyone, for watching Diatribe, my very first one. We'll have guests on. I'm going to try to do it weekly, but I'm busy, so I'm running 3 companies. But we'll try to do it weekly as much as possible. And again, hopefully it's that sort of real talk that you're looking for, and something that'll make you think. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments. I'm happy to answer those after the fact. Maria will also, she can always pop on and answer a few if you have any questions. She has an amazing job with an amazing boss. I can't tell you anything about it. All I know is don't be trying to poach her, because it's not going to happen. And of course, I coach and teach and all this other stuff. So you can always reach out to me if you need someone to kind of give it to you straight. Thank you all, and we'll catch you on the next diatribe.